10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 327. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 327 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. So happy to have you back, and if you're a new listener, welcome in. So in this week's episode, we are going to talk about the opposite of what we talked about last week. Last week we talked about Charlie Parker's use of chord tones on the strong beat, and this week we're going to look at when he breaks that rule and why, because he is definitely always thinking, and everything that Charlie Parker does is very measured. So we're going to talk about when we see the exception to that rule. What is he doing? Why is he doing it? But before we jump into the show, as always, just wanted to remind everybody this is a listener-supported show. We don't do any advertisements on the program. Instead, we rely on listeners like you to support us with a small monthly donation. And in return for that donation, you do get PDF and audio examples for every single episode so that you have some stuff to put into your jazz education library and work on whenever you want. We support ourselves through the Patreon platform. You can find that by going to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners and getting yourself signed up today. Wanted to give a quick shout out to some new patrons this week. Thank you to our new $5 patrons, JJ and Michael, and thank you to our new $3 patron, Andreas. Thank you guys so much for joining the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson family. Hope you're enjoying all the materials over there. And if you would like to join them in supporting the show, keeping things going, again, you can go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up, and you get instant access to all 327 episodes that we've ever done. All right, so let's dive into the meat of the episode. So just a reminder, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, go and listen to that, because we talk about the fact that Charlie Parker likes to use chord tones 1, 3, 5, 7, or 9 on the strong beats in a measure of 4/4. So the strong harmonic beats are a little bit different than the strong rhythmic beats. We all know that in swing music, the strong rhythmic beats are on 2 and 4, but harmonically, the chords change on beats 1 and 3 about 99% of the time in this style of music. So we see Charlie Parker using a lot of structure in his solos by always playing chord tones whenever the chord changes. But like anything in jazz, there are exceptions to the rule, and places where Charlie Parker kind of steps outside of the system of using a chord tone on a strong beat. So we want to look at why he's doing that, and when he does do that, why is he stepping outside of that rule that seemingly he's come up with for himself? And we're going to discover a few of the reasons. Spoiler alert, the reasons are largely the same, right? Every time he does it, generally, he's doing it kind of for the same reason. All right, so I've got two examples prepared for you this week. So let's go ahead and dive into the first example. I'm going to play it for you first, and then we're going to talk about where he steps outside of this rule. I want you to pay attention, if you're looking at the PDF, to the notes marked in red, because those are the places where he's not playing a chord tone on either 1 or 3. And what I've done is I've kind of marked those sections and the notes that I think are important for what we're going to talk about after we listen to this. So let's check out the line first, then we'll talk about it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So first of all, what a great phrase, really swinging. The chords are really simple over this. Basically what we have is 2 measures of a concert C7, and then we do a 2-5 into an F7 chord, a concert F7 chord. So this is kind of nice because we can look at this without a million different chords happening, and we can concentrate on a couple of them. So the first place I want to draw your attention to is the second measure of this example. You will notice that on beat 3, he is not playing a chord tone. Instead, what he's doing is actually playing flat 9. And you might be saying to yourself, well, Nick, you told us that 9 was a chord tone, and you'd be right about that. But in this case, he's not using that flat 9 as a chord tone, because let's look at what happens right after that note on the and of 3. He goes up to the regular 9, the natural 9. So what we're really seeing him doing is he's delaying that chord tone, that 9, where he would normally put it on beat 3, he's delaying it by 1/2 of 1 beat. And what he's doing is chromatically approaching it from below. Now, we've talked about Charlie Parker's use of chromatic approaches in the past, and this is a great example of where he's sort of breaking one of his golden rules in order to use that chromatic approach. And it actually sounds really good. Our ears don't really notice that it's delayed by a beat because he's framing it in such a way that it's almost inconsequential. But it actually makes the line more interesting, and it makes his playing more interesting because we never know when he's going to land on a chord tone on the strong beats, or if he's going to do something to make it sound a little bit more interesting, to make it a little bit more complicated. So there's the first one. Now, if we go to the third measure of this same example, what we see again is on the downbeat, instead of playing a chord tone, he's playing the 4th over that concert G minor chord, all right? Then he jumps down to A on the and of 1, and then he finally lands on a chord tone actually on beat 2. He lands on the 3rd on beat 2 before he goes into his little 16th note grouping. So I want to give you a second. Think about what he's doing here. We see C, concert C, then concert A, then concert B flat. So if you figured it out already, good for you. It's an enclosure. On beat 1, he's playing above the B flat. And then on the and of 1, he's playing below the B flat. And then on beat 2, he finally lands on the B flat. So again, he's breaking that rule of playing chord tones on the beat with a purpose. He's doing it for a reason. He's using that as an opportunity to delay that B flat until beat 2 and play an enclosure, which makes the line a lot more rich and fun to listen to. So there's example 1. Now let's check out example number 2 that has a few different devices in it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we actually have basically the same chord progression as in example number 1, and these both are from the same solo. So let's find the first place that is marked in red, and that would be in the second measure of example number 2. What we see is on beat 3, we have 4 notes marked in red that are leading to the downbeat of the third measure of this particular example. So let's look at what's going on there. The first thing that I notice is on beat 3, he's actually using the major 7 over a dominant chord. Now that's supposed to be like the biggest no-no that we could ever have, right? But let's figure out why he's doing it. So what we see is we see a chromatic line going through beat 3, beat 4, and then that chromatic line ends on the downbeat of the next measure. And you will notice that the downbeat of the next measure is the 5th of the chord that's happening. It's the 5th of the concert C7 chord. So what is he doing? He's using chromaticism again. This time he's using a pretty extended chromatic device, which is he's starting on beat 3 and he's leading chromatically all the way to the downbeat of the next measure. And what I love about this is it just goes to show you how worked out Charlie Parker's playing is. The fact that he's thinking actually 2 beats ahead of where he's going. So that's the first thing I notice. And the second thing I notice is that I always say it's not about where you are, it's about where you're going. And I think that is perfectly demonstrated in this first little chunk that's marked in red. All right, let's jump to the next part that's marked in red, which is also in measure 3. So on beat 3 of measure 3, we see a 9th. So this actually does fit into the rules, doesn't it? Because we said that the 9th is a chord tone. But I wanted to point out the fact that he's doing another chromatic approach, and he is kind of delaying the sound of the 3rd until actually beat 4, which sounds really cool. And I wanted to highlight this one because it is another chromatic device, but it's what we call a double chromatic approach. So on beat 3, he's playing the 9th, which is D, and then he's going up a half step on the and of 3 to D sharp, and then on beat 4, he's finally arriving on that 3rd, which is being approached from 2 half steps below in succession. So in this case, I wouldn't actually consider that D to be a chord tone, even though it is the 9th, because it's pretty clear that he's trying to drive your ears toward the 3rd on beat 4. And I know that could be a little bit confusing. He's saying, well, sometimes you consider the 9th to be a chord tone and sometimes you don't. But remember, we have to put everything in context. Everything that we study when it comes to jazz, there has to be a greater context around it. And this is what makes it so fun, right? You think you have something figured out and then you notice a different context or a different use case. And I consider this to be a different use case. All right, and then we've got one more in the 4th measure of example 2. On the downbeat over the concert G minor 7 chord, we actually see a sharp 4 on the downbeat. And we know that that's not really a solid note at all. That's not going to clearly outline the harmony. But again, what is he doing? He's just delaying that 5th by a half of a beat. So again, what we see there is a chromatic approach from below, and we see the chord tone getting delayed by a half of a beat. Again, just making it more interesting, keeping everybody on their toes, and preventing Charlie Parker's playing from becoming utterly predictable. It's really pretty genius. All right, so there you have it. A couple of examples and an explanation on why Charlie Parker at times doesn't use the chord tone on the strong beat rule. If you have any questions, let me know. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember, you can grab the PDF with these 2 examples so you can see exactly what I'm talking about, see those color coding by going to 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, and getting yourself signed up today. Thank you to everybody that has been with me for years over at the Patreon site. Really couldn't do this show without you, and I really appreciate it. All right, we will see you next week with another brand new episode. Hope everybody's doing okay out there, staying safe and healthy, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.